Good evening, everyone. I am State Representative Gary Turco from the 27th District. Includes mostly Newington and a small piece of New Britain. And thank you all very much for being here. This is our end of session wrap-up meeting. We did a beginning of session kickoff about a week or two. Representative Farrar, Senator Lesser, and I did back in, when was that we did that? Early January?
Yeah.
To talk about the things that we wanted to work on this session and to hear what your priorities were in the community. And then we've been hard at work for the last 6 months, and we're excited to tell you what we've accomplished in the budget and what laws were passed, and to start collecting ideas for 2024. Because time will go quickly, and we'll need to start introducing bills in the winter of this year. And there was a lot we were able to get done this session, but of course there's some things that didn't make it over the finish line, and we want to get your ideas for next year. So I really appreciate you all being here on a beautiful summer day where you could probably be at a pool or a beach somewhere to join us. Representative Farrar?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's for those of you I met before, great to see you again. For those of you that I haven't, I'm Representative Kate Farrar, and I wonderfully am the other state representative in Newington with Gary. Newington is represented by 2 state representatives and 1 senator, Senator Matt Lesser. I wonderfully started serving in this role just as of January of this year. I had previously served 1 term just serving West Hartford, and now with the redistricting that happened with the latest census, I now represent southern West Hartford, where we're right on the border of with Elmwood and the mall, and now the part of the part of Newington I represent is really western Newington, and I know several constituents that are here. And we're just thrilled to get to share a little bit of what all of the marathon was worth over the last 6 months on behalf of the Connecticut residents and yourselves. And really, as Gary said, to take any of your questions and to make sure that we're listening as we kind of ramp up for what 2024 might bring. So Senator Lesser got here just in the time to pass the mic to him, and we're just doing brief introductions, Senator.
Just who we are.
Just who we are before we get into everything that happened.
Well, good evening, everybody. I am, as Representative Farrar said, I'm Senator Matt Lesser. I represent the entire town of Newington. I also represent 4 other communities, and it's a real great pleasure to work with these 2 incredible state reps who are some of the smartest, hardest working people I've found anywhere. So we have a great team here in Newington. I am we each have jobs in the legislature. My job is I'm the co-chair of the Human Services Committee, which oversees the Department of Social Services, the Department of Children and Families, some of the expenditure of Medicaid funds, and I also work on the Appropriations Committee, which focuses on the spending side of the state budget. Kate's on the Finance Committee, but we focus on where those tax dollars are going. I'm also on the Insurance and Real Estate Committee, the Labor Committee. I got to remember all of my committees. I'm the Vice Chair of the Housing Committee, and I'm on Judiciary. And so we had a lot going on. Just getting to meetings is sometimes a challenge, but we were able to get an awful lot of bills done this year, and hope we can talk about that and also the impact on Newington. So,
Great, and now we just like to, you know who we are, quickly go around the room and just get to know who you are, because it's important, for us to be representatives that are accessible, but we also really want to try to get to know the people we represent. So if you can just tell us your name, where in town you live, if you happen to own a business or something. Don't go too in-depth with your questions or policies or anything like that. We're going to get to all of that after, but just a quick round of who you are. And we'll start over here and go up and down.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Bailey O'Neill. I live on Avery Road in Newington. I've got 2 kids, so I'm very interested in that angle, and I recently joined the board of directors of the Newington Children's Theater Company in town.
Excellent.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, I'm Matt Principe, and I live in Newington on Millbrook Court. That's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt.
Edwin Miller, to be in District 20 with Kate.
Thank you,
I
Ed.
was in District 27 with Gary, and I live at Westchester College.
Thank you.
Gary Goodman, 54 Southwood Road. Thanks for coming.
Kathy Clary, Cedar Ridge Road, also the Executive Director of Connecticut Legal Rights Project in Middletown.
Thank you, Kathy.
I live on Ben Road. I just recently connected with Kate.
Yes.
Some issues receiving
What was your first name?
Lynn.
Lynn.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lynn.
North Cell. I live in Rutland, New York. September 1st, I will be visiting friends in the library.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Pat Lang, I live on Costa Drive, sometime AARP volunteer, and I also taught the AARP vaccine course, sometimes here at the senior center.
Great.
My name's Aquino, life from in town, work for the Board of Education, I'm also on the Board of Education.
Betsy Franklin, also a life from town. Loretta, Ingrid Avenue, right here downtown. Current and soon to be outgoing president of the Friends of the Library and Democratic Town Council.
And thanks for all the work you do, Kim, on the town council.
you,
We know
Kim.
that's a lot of work as well, and getting the budget passed and everything.
My name is Shirley Grant. I've lived in Newington since 1973, and
Newcomer.
I had to give up my home due to the high taxes, and now I'm living in senior HUD housing.
Okay.
Paula Cormash, I live on Pleasant Drive, and I teach in Brighton High School.
Awesome.
Andy Brecker, Stagecoach Lane, former development director for the town, on the board of the library and Newington Children's Theater Company, and I play tennis at the fun.
Nice.
My name is Jan Princeman, Tremont Street in Newington, probably 45, 50 years, I can't count that one. And I'm a proud constituent of the three very lovely people sitting in front of us.
My name is Hal Kritzman. I'm her other half. We've kind of attached together. Also, we had a business in town with a brick and mortar facility for 48 years and retired somewhat out of school 5 years in August. But we're still working and we still enjoy working within the town. These three fine people. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Wayne Corvo, live on Walsh Avenue. I've been with the Board of Education now for my 9th school year.
Thanks, Mike.
Janet Gray, I actually live in Middletown, Connecticut, and my husband
Awesome.
Scott Gray, I work at middle school supporting library for the wing.
Awesome.
I'm Alex Maslak. I drive through Newington all the time on the way to my in-laws' house. So, I'm here to see my buddy Wayne get an award.
Awesome.
I'm Alicia, and I work at Markville as well, and I'm here to support my colleague, Susan.
Thank you. And the staff back there, you'd like to introduce yourselves?
Brady Rockland, I work with Gary. Brian O'Connor, photographer. Jason York, I'm Gary's press aide at the Capitol.
And also a Newington resident.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Very important.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. It gives us a great idea where everyone lives and different backgrounds and occupations and stuff like that. We want to take a moment before we get into the formal presentation, the three of us, to congratulate and thank Wayne Corvo. If you will please come up, Wayne, to the front here for your heroism in the town of Newington. So for all of you who may not know Wayne or read about what he has done, Wayne as a school security officer, is that the right title?
Correct.
At Martin Kellogg Middle School, saved two young ladies' lives who were choking. A girl and a boy. Those two girls. A young boy and a young girl's lives who were choking in the cafeteria this past year.
Not at the same time.
Not at the same time,
No.
but throughout the year.
Two different times.
Two different occurrences.
Yeah.
When I received the information from the young woman's parents about what you did and how grateful they were for you saving their daughter's life. I said to Senator Lester and Representative Farrar, okay, we've got to figure out a way to congratulate Wayne. Let me get further details from our superintendent, Dr. Maureen Brummett. And then Dr. Brummett said, well, actually, this wasn't the first time he saved someone's life. So I was like, all right, we really got to make this special. So I'm so glad that you're here today, Wayne. And if you don't mind, would either of you like to read the citation?
Do you want to read it together? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah,
All right.
go ahead. So I'll start it off. So on behalf of the Connecticut General Assembly, this is an official citation from Representative Turco, myself as Representative Farrar, and Senator Lesser, that be it hereby known to all that the Connecticut General Assembly hereby offers its sincerest congratulations to Wayne Corriveau, and in its recognition of...
Dramatic suspense. In recognition of Wayne Corriveau, school safety officer at Martin Kellogg Middle School, whose swift actions and dedication to duty have saved students' lives. His unhesitating application of the Heimlich maneuver directly saved the life of a middle school student not only once, but an astounding 2 times. Mr. Corriveau's compassion in the hours and days afterward was commendable and appreciated. He is loved deeply by the students and the staff as he continues to go above and beyond for his job. And it's signed this 5th day of, well, no, it's not the 5th. It's signed today at the state capitol, Hartford, Connecticut, by Martin M. Looney, President Pro Tempore of the state Senate, Matt Ritter, Speaker of the House, and Stephanie Thomas, Secretary of the state.
Take a picture with you. Official photographer.
Gotta get this official. Thank you.
Would you like to say a few words?
I wasn't expecting this, to be honest. This is, when I got a phone call last week, I was actually golfing. And I was like, all right, who's calling me? Unrecognized number. And I called Austin.
Yes.
Austin back. And he says, hey, you're getting something Monday night. And I was like, he goes, I don't know what you're getting, but you got to be there at 6 o'clock. I was like, all right. But well, I want to thank my colleagues that are here right now and their spouses. Thank you very much for coming out, supporting me. I never thought in all these years, I did 22 years before working for the Newington Public Schools. I had done 8 years in the military, 8 years in the Army. I did 22 years with the Department of Correction. I taught CPR. I taught the Heimlich maneuver. Never thought that I'd ever had to use that. So thank God for my training. I'm glad. I'm happy that the Newington Public Schools has certified all of the security officers at this point now. In this, I pushed it, and at this point, every single security officer in the town of Newington now, in the school system, is CPR qualified, and they're Heimlich maneuver qualified, EpiPen qualified, AED qualified. So we got everything. So, wow. So I'm glad.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Kids got to slow down when they're eating, right?
Well, they got to stop with the food challenges.
Oh, is that what it is? Ooh, that's that dangerous. Well, we're glad that we have you there.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And you're all more than welcome to stay, or if you have to leave.
The first one was waffles in the front, second was chicken nuggets.
I know.
All right, thank you everyone for allowing us to spend a little time. I think you'll agree that that was a good use of some of our time tonight to thank Wayne for all of his service and his heroism. So thank you again. And now we will get to... Thank you. Now we will get to discussing the budget that passed and some of the legislation that passed. We're going to give some brief remarks on some of the things we want to make sure you know about, and then allow time for questions. There is also a packet in the front. Grady can bring it to anybody that didn't pick it up, but it also has this. It's the Office of Legislative Research has put together a summary of some of what they believe are the most important bills that we passed this session that you can take home with you. But I'll just first start with saying that we have passed the budget.
We're good.
They're coming back in.
Just making sure nobody left their purse.
Oh, somebody left the purse?
No, they're coming back in.
Oh, that's Jan. That's Jan Kritzman. So the budget was passed on time. It was balanced. It was a bipartisan budget. It fully funds our rainy day fund, something that we've been doing for a long time. I think now up to 18% of our total operating cost we have in a reserve fund. God forbid we ever hit a recession. And it also allows us to pay off debt, over $2 billion in debt. It includes another year of very, very large tax cuts, which Representative Farrar is going to review for you, and which money might be coming back to you and your families, and also does a lot that Senator Lesser can speak to on appropriations with funding nonprofits, higher education, and other important areas. But one that you should all know about is the increase to municipal aid, primarily for education funding. We were able to help deliver over $3 million, I think it's about $3.7 million, is that right, Jason? Mm-hmm. For Newington, that is a large portion of that is for education funding, funding our education cost sharing. And that $3.7 million in additional dollars the next 2 years was desperately needed by our school systems, who have really been hit hard. You know, we've met with Dr. Brummett, we've met with our Board of Education, we've talked to a lot of teachers, we've talked to a lot of parents, and throughout the pandemic, our schools were really hit hard with trying to, do the virtual learning, trying to provide everything that our students needed so they wouldn't fall behind. And it was a real stressful last couple of years. And as a New Britain teacher, New Britain, which I also represent, is going to receive over $15 extra million in aid. So all the municipalities around the state are going to receive millions of more dollars to help them and support our teachers, support our students. That also helps with our property taxes, right? Because the more money that comes from the state to municipalities, the more they're not reliant as much on our car and our home property taxes and businesses, and that state aid could help with that. And then Kate's going to talk about the taxes again, but I just looked at my car tax bill, and it is going down by $75 this year, which is really great. So I hope that means the rest of you in Newington it's going down too. One of the things we did was we maintained the cap in the mill rate for cars. So cars cannot be taxed at more than 32.46 mils, and we reimbursed Newington and all the other municipalities the difference, okay? And the other thing before I pass along to my colleagues I wanted to mention, which is, I sound like a broken record because I've talked about this a lot over the last 6 months, but it was one of my top priorities, and we were able to accomplish a lot with it, and that is roadway safety issues. As you probably have witnessed just driving the last couple of years, the pandemic, for whatever reason, and there's a lot of, and this isn't unique to Connecticut, it's actually worldwide, but very much so across the nation, that during the pandemic, when there wasn't a lot of people on the road, there wasn't a lot of enforcement, people's behavior started to change, and they were driving very recklessly. And that has not changed back since now we are moving out of the pandemic. 2022 was the deadliest year on Connecticut roads, with Connecticut residents dying, pedestrian fatalities, people on bicycles, and unfortunately 2023 is looking like it could even be worse than 2022. So we took this issue very seriously. We even had a colleague of ours that died on opening night of session from a wrong way driving accident. So some of the legislation we passed was part of the Department of Transportation had been working on this Vision Zero Council. This was a council that we passed in legislation and formed in 2021. A group of experts to come up with policies that needed to be changed here in Connecticut, and we passed as many of those policy recommendations as we could. Some of those include automated detection ticketing devices, so the cameras for high speed and red lights. If anyone's interested, I can go through a lot more detail on how those are going to work. They are not mandatory. It's an option by the municipality, and we created this legislation to be really done in a way that is based on data, on where there's a high rate of accidents and collisions. And there's a review process, appeal process, to try to make it very fair. A lot of money is going into infrastructure, roadway design, and ensuring those entrance and exit ramps on highways, there's clearer signage and technology being used, so hopefully people are not going the wrong way. Improved driver education as well, to try to get people to understand the laws and try to get people to understand their responsibilities as drivers. It's a Facebook Live there. So that's a little bit about the highlights that I wanted to talk about on roadway safety and on the budget and education funding. We're going to get to questions soon, Terry. And now I'm going to pass it along to Representative Farrar.
Thanks, Gary. With those highlights, but as you heard from Gary, each of us were going to try to give some very brief highlights, and happy to take questions on those items, or if we don't bring up something that you have a question about, please throw it in, because we want to make sure you leave here with all of the knowledge that you came seeking for tonight. So as Representative Turco noted a little bit about the budget, and I'm going to focus there at the outset because one of my roles in the legislature is I serve as vice chair of the Finance Committee. In our state legislature, we have a Finance Committee which sets the policy for revenue, the revenue that comes into the state. And then, as Senator Lesser said, we have an Appropriations Committee that makes determinations of how that money is spent. And as vice chair of the Finance Committee, one of the things I spoke about at the start of session was how critical it was that we really fix what is an upside-down tax code in our state, where our lower and middle-class families and seniors pay a disproportionate amount of taxes compared to the wealthiest in our state. Last year, when we were in the legislature, we passed a historic, the largest tax cut our state had ever seen. And again, in this year's budget, we actually passed now the second largest tax cut our state will ever see, and actually the largest income tax cut that we've ever passed as a state. So in regards to how these tax cuts are targeted, they are targeted for our middle class and our lowest income families and seniors. So what that means is that our marginal tax rates are decreasing at the lowest two margins, 3% and 5% are decreasing. So that would mean for middle class families, they will see, several $100s less in taxes that you'll be paying on income tax. Additionally, we fixed what was referred to often as the retirement cliff that had been created in regards to the kind of lack of taxes that we were trying to have placed on folks' retirement savings. And we've fixed that cliff by ensuring that instead of that cliff cutting off at $75,000 and $75,000 for individuals and $100,000 for joint filers, we've moved it now to $100,000 for individuals and $150,000 for joint filers, really trying to ease that burden for many seniors in our state. And finally, in regards to the lowest income residents in our state, we have expanded once again what's referred to as the Earned Income Tax Credit in our state. And so that'll mean, in combination between this income tax cut and the Earned Income Tax Credit change, if you're a family that is making less than $50,000 in the state, you'll pay no income tax whatsoever, which again is a real way of making sure that our state is more affordable. Many folks often, don't realize that the majority of our Connecticut residents, make less than $70,000, in our state. And so we're talking about our neighbors, our family, ourselves in regards to reducing this tax burden. And that's why it was so critical that these are targeted cuts. And they also ensure that we're keeping true to the cuts we made last time. So capping the car tax that Gary mentioned is really pivotal. And we also kept in place the property tax credit so that as a state, we can additionally help offset that property tax burden by keeping with what is a $300 property tax credit for folks as well. So all of those as in a full, I think really our effort to make sure that we're listening, we're addressing this upside down tax system that we have in our state, and again, trying to make sure that our state is more affordable. On that count as well, I will just kind of comment on kind of two other significant areas in our budget and legislatively that I was proud to work on. One of the other items, in addition to education, that I hear a lot from folks about, particularly in Newington and West Hartford, where I represent, is the real burden for many families of childcare costs. It costs just as much to send a child to childcare in our state as it does for tuition for college. And so one of the things we did in this year's budget was invest over $100 million more into our early childhood system so that we can increase the rates for early childhood providers so that they can actually hopefully pay their staff more, we can retain more of that staff and have more childcare options within our community. And I was proud to be a part of that in my role on the Early Childhood Caucus. And then finally, I just wanted to mention one of the things that I also hear a lot about that is an issue that has kind of unfortunately gained in prominence in our lives in the last year, which is the role that I have, and all three of us are proud to serve on the Reproductive Rights Caucus in our state to ensure that we're protecting reproductive health care, expanding access to reproductive health care in our state as well. And so this year, I'm proud to say that Connecticut really is leading the way across the country to be protecting providers and patients as they seek reproductive health care, and also that we're expanding access. That's expanding access for prenatal care, that's expanding access for birth control, that's expanding access for gender-affirming care, all of the above, so that folks really can ensure that they can access affordable care whenever they seek it here in our state. So that was a big step that our state took, especially in recognition just last week of the 1 year since the overturning of Roe v. Wade. On the front of Newington, Gary mentioned that, we delivered more municipal aid for Newington. Senator Lesser is going to share a little bit more of what we delivered for Newington, but I wanted to mention a project that all three of us are currently working on, which is to secure more funds for the town of Newington in school construction dollars for John Wallace Middle School. There has been an approval by the board and council to pursue a referendum vote that you all will be voting on this fall to hopefully approve what would be school construction renovation for John Wallace Middle School. This is to update a wing of the middle school, much needed for safety, technology concerns, a range of needs of students and teachers in that school. And that is something the three of us have been working on with the superintendent and our chair of the board, chair of the education committee in the legislature. And that'll be a key priority for us in the coming year so that we can not just deliver the funds for that, but also ensure that the funds are readily available so the town can really start that project and complete it within an 18-month time frame, which is what they're hoping to do from the beginning of that project. And so For us, I, again, just wanted to highlight those key areas of, how our budget, we're really trying to make sure we're addressing a lot of affordability needs, which we're happy to take questions on. Again, wanted to highlight some of those key reproductive rights issues, and then finally, some of the progress we're making on the school construction front. But now I'll gladly pass it to Senator Lesser to cover so much of what he did as well, and also some of the other areas of Newington-specific focus.
Thank you, Kate. And I will try to be brief, because what I really want to do is to hear from all of you about what you care about. And maybe we could sort of tailor our remarks to your specific questions or priorities. But just going briefly, my priorities going into the budget this year were kind of complicated, because on the one hand, we started out the year with a record budget surplus, which is a welcome change from where we'd been for a long time, when we had year after year of budget deficits. And so the question is, what do we focus on? And so there were a couple of things that were, I think, three main priorities that I was really focusing on. One was addressing the workforce crisis in the state. And Newington, as some folks know, has the highest percentage of state employees of any of our 169 towns. I don't know how I don't know who did that calculation. It sounds right. I don't know. West Hartford might give us a run for our money, but I think we edge out West Hartford. But due to retirement incentive, a lot of people retired in the last couple of years. And so while our state workforce was bloated for many years, all across state government, we're actually seeing real challenges fulfilling basic missions of state government, because there just aren't the people there to perform basic tasks. And that's a state crisis, but also on the municipal level, I think compounded by burnout from COVID-19. You talk to any teacher, you go to any school district, you'll see that there's also a hiring shortage on the local level. Keeping and attracting qualified teachers and paraeducators and other school staff has been a real challenge. And then all across, you see in our healthcare infrastructure, there's a nursing shortage as well. So addressing that workforce crisis, particularly in the public sector, has been a challenge. And figuring out how can we make sure that we are recruiting young people to come work for the state of Connecticut, to go be nurses, to be teachers, to work for the DOT. That was a big challenge at the start of the year. We also had to figure out what are we doing. The last couple of years, the federal government came in and supported us through COVID with one-time relief funds, and that was really helpful. We were able to expand support. We were able to keep things going when people were out of work during the pandemic, but a lot of that funding is expiring. And at the same time, I don't have to tell any of the folks in this room, we also saw quite a bit of inflation. So how do we make sure that we are maintaining services, or we're not seeing a huge gap in service delivery at the same time that things are more expensive? And I'll give you one classic example of where we had that challenge is on elderly nutrition. One of the services that we provide right in this building is meals for seniors all across the state. And in September this year, funding for elderly nutrition from the feds is dropping, because the federal government is cutting off that pandemic era assistance that they were very generous with. And at the same time, food costs are more expensive. The price of eggs and chicken is more this year than it was last year or the year before. So how do we make up that gap? And how do we make sure that seniors in Newington and other towns are protected? So that was a challenge. So we had to make a lot of tough choices. I can tell you on the elderly nutrition side, we were able to significantly expand support for elderly nutrition beyond anything the state's done before, to try to make up some of that shortfall. We're also working with nonprofit providers across the state to try to do that. We're also dependent as well on private philanthropy to try to make up that shortfall as well. But it's tough. And even though on paper we have this big surplus, when you look at inflation, when you look at our long-term liabilities, and when you look at the drop in federal funding, it's meant that it hasn't necessarily felt that we're as flush as you would think we are at first glance. We've heard from a lot of our nonprofit providers of human services, for example, that they are particularly strapped for cash right now. And so we were really focusing, how do we keep those nonprofits all across the state that provide services for people with disabilities, for example, for the elderly? How do we keep them going? How do we make sure that we're funding our drug and alcohol treatment programs? And so this was a really tricky year on that front, and we had some successes and there's some disappointments, and I'm happy to get into that in as much detail as you'd like. Because Kate sort of alluded to it, I do want to talk about, before I go too far afield, one important victory for Newington, and we heard about it because the fire chief told us this was his top priority. A few years ago, we banned what's called a forever chemical. It's called PFAS, which is used in fire suppression by fire departments around the world. And it turns out that research shows that it's a potential carcinogen and very dangerous. So Connecticut, I think rightly, banned the use of PFAS by fire departments and in other circumstances. The problem is that we didn't provide local fire departments with the resources to decontaminate their equipment. And so what we found out from the chief here is that there were a number of fire trucks that had some contamination in them from this PFAS-containing foam. And although you could use the water, right, the fire trucks spray water, you couldn't replace the contaminated foam with newer green foam without contaminating that green foam. So we were able to get, as part of the state budget, a pocket of money of $3 million to help Newington and other towns that weren't able to provide this decontamination the support they need, so they're going to be able to use their fire trucks going forward. And that's a good thing if you're worried about fire coverage.
And the town won't have to pay for it.
And the town won't have to pay for it. Your property taxes won't go up to pay for it, and that's important. Other things, the area agencies on aging, which provide support for seniors, they said they were getting way more calls than for people requesting assistance than they could solve. So provided some funding to give them each 2 more people to answer phone calls and help seniors in our communities. We did a lot for children with disabilities, passed as part of House Bill 5001, support to help ease waiting lists to access services through the state for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and kids with autism spectrum disorders and adults as well. So we can go in many different directions on that. And I just sort of alluding to the drop of federal funds. Connecticut historically has had a roller coaster budget where we have good years and we've got bad years. And a lot of it depends on our friends down in Fairfield County who make a lot of money on Wall Street one year and not so much the next year, and figuring out how we can sort of build a more sustainable budget where we're not seeing huge increases in spending and huge cuts in spending. That's been a challenge. We've been working on trying to change the way we budget to try to smooth things out, have more predictability. I think the budget this year goes some direction down that road. Certainly there are things that I would have loved to pass that we didn't, but I think the most important thing you should know is that it's not a radical budget. Not a whole lot changed from last year. We did do some big tax cuts. We didn't dramatically increase state spending. We are trying to keep things smooth so that we're paying down our long-term liabilities, that we have the record rainy day fund that Gary talked about, that we're able to build our economy steadily, and we're ready for whatever is coming our way. So with that, I'm happy to talk about any Newington-specific issues. One thing that a little bit, you may remember there was some controversy in town a couple years ago about the number of polling places. There was a proposal to reduce the number of polling places in Newington. We passed something this year in part of the state budget called the Connecticut Voting Rights Act, and that's legislation that I had introduced, and it creates more rules for the road for how towns redistrict, for how you address and resolve disputes, hopefully out of court. That's the goal, is to get towns to resolve these disputes quickly, and hopefully that will, obviously we resolved the issue in Newington some time ago, but hopefully that'll give some extra comfort to people in towns across the state so that, your right to vote is protected, and whether no matter what town you live in, and we've got more consistency across the state so that every vote is counted.
Questions, comments, or maybe you already have ideas for next year? Terry, you've been waiting patiently with your hand up.
And we'll just repeat whatever the question is.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank all three of you. I think you're doing a good job over there. I think the legislators are really doing a good job. And it's good to see the animosity is being kept at a low level, because there's been some years where it's really nasty up there. And I'm really glad to see that people are working together. And I think what you've done in terms of the budget is really good. My wife and I have been together 52 years, and we decided 52 years ago we're going to have cats and no kids. So we don't have any children, but we realize how critical it is to fund and educate our kids. Okay, it's not just for getting them good jobs and everything else, but it's for keeping them out of trouble. If they're educated and they can go out and get a decent job, they're not going to go into crime. A lot of people go to crime not because they're criminals, but because they don't have the money. So I think you're doing a good job of funding the things that need to be funded. But education, again, to me is critical, and we need to make sure that we're doing that, because if you don't get education, people are not getting good jobs, they're not getting money, and that's when they turn and start doing some other things. And again, I was Justice Forever, and so I understand it. When people are in need, you got to feed your family. You're going to do what you got to do. So I think you've balanced it pretty well. We're talking about money, different topic, but we're talking about money for education, and it sounds to me like we're doing some stopgap measures for the next 2 years to keep everything afloat. But that raises the question to me, how are we addressing both in the town and the state to increase the budgets so that we don't have to, in 2 years from now, do any more stopgap measures, but rather that the budgets are where they need to be to fund and educate our kids?
Do you want to start?
I will say, Terry, so that 3.7 million, I mean, that is an additional funding that will not be decreased. Our plan is to fully phase the educational cost sharing formula in. So Newington will continue to see additional increases the next few years until that formula is 100% funded. And then from there, on the state level, we have to have a conversation once we fully fund that formula, what the increases look like from there. But at least my 5 years as a legislator now, we've increased education every single year to Newington and other municipalities. It's been one of our top priorities in legislature. I would assume that that will continue to be. On the local level, it's a little different. I know that on the local level, Newington has struggled to get the council to approve additional funding it needs. And that will be up to the voters of Newington, the people of Newington, if that is a priority for them, to elect people who say they will support funding additional education. It hasn't happened the last couple elections. We'll see what happens going forward.
And you mentioned the referendum as well.
Yeah.
Or I'll mention, sure. So, and as Kate mentioned earlier, we're also the John Wallace referendum. If folks care about that, those upgrades I know are important to folks from that community. That's an opportunity as well to increase funding locally. And bring in some state funding too. We would provide state support as well.
Yeah, and I would just add around education, I think it's more right than just the K-12 mentality about education, right? It really is, as I commented earlier, what we're doing as a state to invest in birth to K, some of the most important development months and years of a child's life. And then also, we recognize that folks, in order to gain economic stability, need some form of education beyond that 12th grade. And here, even in this budget, we did expand on what is debt-free community college in our state, which has been a really great way of ensuring that we're creating an affordable option for people to pursue education beyond that 12th year. And Gary also worked on some very important student loan legislation. So I think we have to make sure we're taking that broad approach and not just thinking the K to 12, because all of that cycle is important. And I think for everyone in the room too, we know that there might be another point in your life when you have to go back to school, and when you're changing careers or you have a loss of a job. And so making sure that we have this accessible on-ramps for people to change careers and rethink those job opportunities is really critical. So, but it's a great question.
Thank you, Terry. I'm so glad that Representative Farrar mentioned the PACT program, which is our debt-free community college program, something that I'm so happy that we have here in Connecticut. If you know any young people, in high school now, and they're thinking, how am I going to afford college when I graduate, or thinking about taking out loans, make sure they know about this really great option. We have excellent community colleges here in Connecticut. A lot of the community college classes are taught by professors who are also teaching at UConn and our other four-year universities. And it is completely free. There's even a stipend to use to help pay for books for any of our high school graduates. And we've expanded this program year after year the last 5 years, where now it's not just full-time students, part-time students can qualify for this well. Because we know that a lot of our community college students, they're also working to help pay for their household expenses. Now we added in this budget this year the ability for someone who started out in community college and whatever life circumstances they had to drop out, now they can go back to community college and they can be part of this program where it is fully paid for them. So everyone in Connecticut who chooses, who wants to get an associate's degree, now has the ability as far as the cost. So I think that's a great thing. Thanks, Terry, for the question. Next question.
Yeah, please.
Hi, I just have a question on the utility, control of utilities.
Yeah.
The senior citizens, they're on a fixed income, and you have Eversource going up, TNT going up, everybody's going up. And again, is there something being done or can be done? Representation at that point there?
Yeah.
We passed something called Senate Bill 7 this year that will hopefully make a difference. There are a couple of things going on right now. One, for a very long time, not just the last couple of years, the utilities have really gamed the system, gamed the regulatory review process. We have an entity called PURA, which has to approve rate increases, and they're supposed to be able to fight back, and to really scrutinize potential rate increases, but they haven't had the tools to do that. And so with SB 7 this year, we're attempting to dramatically rewrite the rules to even the playing field. And I don't know that those changes are going to work, but I will say, I was with my colleague who's the Senate chair of the Energy Committee, and we were at a retirement dinner, and a helicopter came in and landed at the dinner, right outside the dinner. And it was the CEO of Eversource who came in and yelled at my colleague. And I thought that was a good sign that maybe we're on the right track, because the CEO doesn't usually fly in and yell at senators. But one of the things we were finding out was that they go around and they make charitable donations all across our communities, and that's wonderful. I applaud that. I think it's great. But it turned out that they were billing us for those charitable contributions. They were able to go in and go to PURA and say, give us our money back. Now, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, we have wonderful public-spirited corporations all across the state, but we shouldn't be paying for our own charity. Like, that's not charity. That's what that is free PR for a utility, and that's not a good deal. Beyond that, though, I mean, the major driver we saw this huge increase in January in electric rates. The big driver there wasn't Eversource, to be honest. It was higher natural gas prices, and that's something that's, people point to the war in Ukraine. There are a lot of different issues going on. We did just see an announced drop. The prices have stabilized a bit, and so they're going to be lower this summer. we're at the end of the pipeline. We're dependent on natural gas prices. That's what sets our rates. But we can make sure that the rate setting process doesn't pad things like charitable donations. That doesn't make any sense. And that we're better able to really ask hard-hitting questions when they go and say, oh, our costs went up. Let's really look at it and see why our rates are going up faster than they are in Massachusetts, in New York. We're all in the same boat on that front, and that's really for the birds.
I would just add, it's a great question because I think we talked a lot about it in January, rightly so. And you're right, almost every week, understandably, it's a topic that I get by an email or phone call from a constituent. And it's one of the reasons at the start of session, I was on a bill that kind of became a part of SB 7, which was not only these charitable donations, but prohibiting the lobbying expenses of these companies, including Eversource, from going into what we're paying for rates, which was also part of what was happening. And then additionally, one of the things we're kind of giving PURA more ability to do, because I think what's especially frustrating, as Senator Lesser said, there's definitely complexity to the energy market, but when you see, the CEO salaries, increasing and your bill increasing, that's a disconnect, right? And that's why, we are also giving PURA more of the ability to look at how a company's over earnings, aka, some of those higher CEO salaries, should be returned to customers. So, we're really trying to embolden PURA as a regulatory agency, with more of this oversight ability, and we're just going to keep fighting on it because we kind of can't let up in regards to making sure that customers are really the focus, of the energy market. So, great question. Yeah.
Right now there are 3 people on PURA that are appointed by the governor.
Yeah.
And there's been a change. So the governor brought in the new chair of PURA is a young attorney. Actually, I think she's from Maryland, named Marissa Gillette, and she. The utilities are complaining in the newspaper, saying there used to be a much more collegial atmosphere, and all of a sudden people are, there's a lot more rough and tumble atmosphere. Maybe we should have had that rough and tumble many years ago. Maybe we wouldn't be in this mess.
Yeah.
And that's just one example, but some of the instances you just cited are egregious. And so we as citizens should have a say. And is there anything we can do? I mean, we can write to you. But
but that's helpful.
One step, yeah.
Write letters to the current, anything that you can come up with, we'll do.
Sure.
It's, it's David versus Goliath. They have the money, they have the lobbyists, and they have a lot of power.
One thing I want to make sure everyone is aware of, too, is we really don't have a choice on the delivery side of how we get our energy, right? We have to get it through Eversource. But you do have a choice on the supply side.
Yeah.
And thanks to Pat and AARP's great work, because it was a total mess, that third-party, supplier system, and people were getting stuck in these contracts and the variable rates and all that. But a legislature passed a number of years ago, thanks to Senator Lesser as well, to put a lot of reforms, where now you enter into these third-party suppliers other than Eversource, let's say, you can cancel at any time. And it takes a billing cycle to eventually get out, but you can cancel. I went in when it was January or February when we had our energy policy forum. We had PURA here talking about it. And I went in and I locked in a rate that's good for, I think, 2 or 3 years. Now, Eversource just announced that their supply rates are dropping. The fine print in their announcement, they warned us they will be going up again in December, so let's not be surprised. But they said they're dropping, and I said, oh no, I've already, I can get out of my contract, but I did all that work to subscribe, I had to call on the phone, all this. Well, the rate I locked in is still lower than what Eversource has dropped to. So definitely worth to go and do that shopping. Just like I keep getting told that you should shop for new car insurance every once in a while. Don't have all this loyalty to the company. I've been a Liberty Mutual customer for 50 years because there's new competitive rates out there and you can always be saving money. But it takes work and time, right?
Yep.
Is it energizect.com?
Yeah.
I think it's .com, not like .org or something. I think it might be .com. Is it energizect.com? Yes, because they do warn you, make sure you're going to the correct site. Yeah, there are...
It's not .com, yeah.
Great, energizect.com. Walter.
Yeah.
And don't forget, you can always contact Claire Coleman, who's the
Yes.
Consumer Counsel.
Yes.
That her
She's
agency
wonderful.
is expressly created to fight the utilities and to harp on them as much as they can. I don't know if you were around when Barry Zitzer was the original Consumer Counsel. He just beat the utilities over the head constantly. And I don't think it's quite as aggressive an agency as it used to be, but maybe it could be.
Thank you for that.
And that's a good point, Walter. The two towns, Norwich and Wallingford,
Yeah.
that own the delivery system have far cheaper rates than the private companies like Eversource.
It's a public source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Terry, we'll come back to you. I want everyone who hasn't asked a question yet. Jan?
Jan.
I'm Jan Kurtzman, Tremont Street. These three lovely people sitting here, this desk in front of us, are responsible for helping me achieve a dream that I've had for years and years to get mandated health insurance coverage for all kinds of testing to provide for the earliest possible early detection of both breast and ovarian cancer. I received an email from the Insurance Commission last week that will only again at the end of August up at the Legislative Office Building. You'll come with me, I'll go with you, to testify against the insurance company, health insurance companies, for example, Cigna, who want to raise rates on insurance policies for both individual and small group plans, something like 17.5%.
Yeah.
People who have these plans in Connecticut, where there are probably about 250,000 people who are already paying $2,200, $2,500 a month for their family, as it is, with very high deductibles, $5,000, $7,000, $8,000, whatever, I've heard more, huge deductibles. And they pointed out, and specifically, I have a target on my back, that they're upset, and they have to raise the rates because of Public Act 22-90, which is the earliest possible early detection of insurance mandated for breast and ovarian cancer testing. Can you believe it, in the state of Connecticut, which is the second highest rate per capita of breast cancer in the nation, that they are blaming my law, thank you very much, so we'll see you at the end of August, anybody else that wants to come.
Yeah.
And, now, what I'd like to do is there was a full-page picture of David Cardoni, and he's the CEO of
Cigna, yes.
And there saved that full page of his face in the Hartford Courant. I think it was CCAG may have paid for it, I'm not sure this ad. He made in 2021 $93 million salary. And he took a huge pay cut in 2022. He only got $23 million for a salary last year. I don't know what he's going to get this year. He may take another small pay cut. But we'll find out. How dare they raise the
And there really one note. Thank you, Jan, for that. And Jan was talking, for those who are watching on Facebook Live, Jan talked about a bill that the three of us passed working with Jan about advanced detection for breast and ovarian cancer. And it's the strongest, I think we can say it's the strongest law like it in the country.
It is the most comprehensive. It's the gold standard of such in the nation.
And it's going...
I wanted to tell you about, there's about 12 other states now that are copying it. Not to the extent, it's just for screening and diagnostic mammograms, ultrasounds, and MRIs. That's it, it stops right there. We went on to cover all kinds of things without a woman having to take any money out of her pocket.
Right.
I shouldn't say a woman, it's anybody with breasts, right? Because men can get breast cancer.
Absolutely.
And I worry about this transgender population and all the hormones, the estrogen that they're taking, long-term for the rest of their lives. Breast cancer cells love to feed on estrogen, and that worries me very, very much. So we want to get everybody involved with the earliest possible early detection. And these insurance companies don't want to pay for that. They'd rather pay for a late-term diagnosis, where it's a terminal diagnosis, and the person with breast is going to die. But they have to pay $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 for each of the clinical trials to keep that person alive for what, 3-4 years? The person is a single mother. She's got 2-3 kids. She's got 2 jobs. She's got crappy insurance with hugely high deductibles. And then she dies. And they have to pay like $1 million to keep her alive for not very much time at all. Well, who takes care of the kids? Thank you, State of Connecticut, foster care. I'm getting my address to these bean counters at the end of August. I'll be there, you'll be there. I'd like you to be there in person. We should actually sit at a table together.
I'll do a crib sheet for those. If anybody who couldn't hear Jan, or if you're listening online, so Jan is pointing out that the insurance industry or the health insurers are seeking rate increases, significant rate increases for health insurance yet again, and they are there's a hearing coming up in August, and they are blaming Jan's law for the increases. And I think Jan rightly points out that, whenever they ask for rate increases, insurance companies always say, it's not our fault, it's because the legislature or the federal government requires us to cover something. And that's always the cause of higher costs. And the reality is that there are lots of, okay, sure, if you have to pay for health care, I'm sure that costs something. But they're not looking at consolidation in the industry or market segmentation. There are insurance companies that go into state 1 but not into state 2, and somehow there's never too much competition. There's always a limitation on their competition. And also, Jan mentioned CEO compensation and other things that they spend money on that never seems to be the cause of it. It's always consumer protections. And I think you're right to point out when they're going to seek higher costs on one end and they're blaming consumer protections, let's look at everything. Let's not just look at the consumer coverage, but let's look at what we're paying the CEO, how much we're paying shareholders, and really the state of competition. And Walt, your point about the role of markets and bringing down prices, if there isn't an effective market to do that, that's something I think people should look at when you're looking for a rate increase.
Thank you, Jan. Yeah, we'll be there. Please.
I'd like to tell everybody that at this particular legislative LOB and this particular insurance commission hearing with public testimony, I gave my testimony, and I think I was one of the last people to speak. And then the room cleared out, and one of the 4 insurance company monkey-faced people, came up to me, this woman, when the cameras were off, to me, and she said, I want to shake your hand. And I looked at her hand. I didn't want to touch her. She's the enemy. So she said, I want to shake your hand, please. I'm so grateful for what you came and said. So I shook her hand, begrudgingly I shook her hand. Then I noticed that she had tears coming down her cheeks. I gave her my card and then we left. A few months later, I think it was in November, front page of the Hartford Courant Sunday paper. Her name is Karen Moran, and she was, I don't know, vice president of some region or something, or I don't know, Medicare, whatever. She quit. And she went to work for the VA, TRICARE. I feel like up to her. Of course, the other three I didn't get to.
Well, I appreciate for those who couldn't hear and those listening, Jan just recounted how powerful your own personal testimony can be in these hearings. And I would just echo that for anyone who has not participated in a public hearing, either in person or on Zoom with us at the legislature, this is the heart of really how policy happens is, we do really make decisions based on the stories that we hear. And I think that's what was so compelling about this particular law that we were able to pass, just the stories. You have one, we all have friends and family in our lives whose lives could be saved by earlier detection. And so I hope that you just sharing that, Jan, for those of you that may have not considered testifying, the personal story is always the most powerful part of this. And we really want to make sure that we can bring life to your stories to pass more important legislation.
If anyone in this room says to himself one day, there ought to be a law. This is terrible what's going on.
This is it.
Whatever.
Yeah.
You say there ought to be a law. You know how you make the law? The first thing you do is you contact these three. That's the first thing you do. The second thing you do is to bother them. Nicely, nice. Okay. Always the lady, always the gentleman. When they get a bill written, you have to check it over and make sure the wording is correct. And if it isn't, they will help you change the wording so that it's to your liking and it would succeed. Should this bill succeed and become a law, then it's what exactly you want. Then you have to go to work. You can't just sit there and expect them to do everything. They have like 75, 100 bills that they have to do. And you have this one bill that you want. My husband said to me, you're up at the Capitol more than you're at home. What's for dinner at the cafeteria up there? I mean, you have to be there. And I mean late nights, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, you have to be there. Pack a lunch, pack your water bottle, and you have little cards made up and you hand them to every single legislator. And then, if your bill fails and your dream fails, you know what you have to do? You go back again the next year and you do it all over again. How about it took me 3 years to get breast and ovarian cancer law passed?
That is for sure. There's a consumer protection bill. I'm sure Kate and Matt have stories too. It took me 5 years to get it passed. You have to keep coming back with that determination, and eventually.
More into it. Yes. Until you throw the kitchen sink into it, everything, and then it passes.
Yeah, you're lucky like that, Jan. Some of us have to, make compromises to our bills. I think Kathy and then Dr. Toomey.
Okay, I'm going to try to put 3 things in once and make it really quick, so answer however
Okay,
you see fit.
thanks, Kathy.
One is, there's been a lot of attention on kids' mental health for the last several years.
Yep.
What about the adults? Because the kids do grow up and have a whole life now. 2, affordable housing in Connecticut. Those 2 things are related because our clients at CLRP literally spend years at the state hospital because they're on waiting lists to have places to live in the community. Have to do some question about that. And also, the fiscal guardrails, which have accomplished something, because I have lived through those up and downs of the budget, and I hate it. But I also feel like it is a bit of a straitjacket and is limiting us in terms of dealing with some of the most basic human and social services. That's it.
Awesome. Do you want to start?
Well, I'll just say on the affordable housing, Kathy. I mean, we definitely need more workforce, lower income, middle income, senior housing. There's a lot of different. disabled community. There's a lot of different communities that need additional housing. But we have a lot of people who don't want anything new being built in any way. And when a development gets proposed, you go to a TPZ meeting and you have people outraged with additional, strain it's going to provide on the town. Everybody wants, not everybody, a lot of people want it everywhere else but where they live, which means we're never actually going to accomplish any meaningful increase of affordable housing. Our budget includes $600 million for more housing, which is great. That's gonna do something, but we're gonna have to find places to put it, and we're gonna need the help of the community. We're gonna need the help of people that say, you know what, housing for people who are working lower income jobs, like the Cedar Point housing we have that's coming on Cedar, right down the street here. Yep. It's gonna have 108 units, and this is housing for people who have some sort of income to be able to pay for it, that we want individuals to be in our community. So we're going to need voices that drown out the people who say, no, I remember when Newington was all farmland, and we should be going back to that, not letting anyone else move here. Or it's going to be really hard for us to actually move forward.
Just to add to what Gary shared about housing on the point, yes, we have hundreds of millions of dollars in bonding, which is going to be for capital expenses for us to invest in housing development around the state. But there is one piece of legislation that I would say that would have benefited Newington, particularly in a couple of locations, that I will keep fighting for next year, which was a proposal to provide more funding for housing in locations that are considered transit-oriented development zones, which we have in where our fast track stations are in town. And that piece of legislation did not pass. And so I can tell you, for me, it's one of the priorities that I'll be having next year, because we've invested dollars, a lot of state dollars, in these transit hubs. And we want to make sure that there is more housing directly located next to these transit hubs. And towns such as Newington or us in West Hartford that want to ensure that there are more housing options, that legislative proposal would have provided more money towards that. And I think that is really critical kind of in all of these options that we could provide. And to your point around the mental health services, I think at the heart of that, for me, is we have not done enough for our nonprofit providers, and that they are very pivotal in providing so many services and a true safety net for so many folks in need, mental health, substance, homelessness, all of the above. And we can't just be in a state of ongoing crisis for them. So really fighting for some sustainable funding for nonprofits, I think, is key. And finally, to your point around what's often referred to as the fiscal guardrails, I think we have to ensure that we're thinking, about the investments we need to make and not starving our state just to pay off our debt. I think there has to be a balance. Yes, we have to pay off the debt that is there way before we were in office. But if we don't support our nonprofits, or we don't invest in childcare, or we don't address homelessness, we're going to have so many other problems on our hands, in 20 years if we don't do that. I think one of the budget proposals that was on the table this year that unfortunately did not make its way into the budget was really thinking about ways to consider money that kind of is considered outside what we have as a spending cap, as some of those essential services, so that we could, put a few $100 million extra funds towards education or towards our nonprofits, while still keeping with some of these guardrails that are in place. So that fight, I think, will continue in the coming years, because we know that we can't ignore so many of the needs that our communities have.
everything that these guys said, and then I'll add just a couple of other things. Kate's absolutely right, though, on nonprofit funding. We were able to increase nonprofit funding by 2.5% this year, but inflation has been more than that. And so we're effectively ceding these folks a cut at a time when the need has gone up. And I think that's a real problem when it comes to providing basic services. We also, on both mental health and substance abuse, we cut back services the last few years at a time when demand has never been higher. And in fact, I know on the substance abuse side, we closed a bunch of state-provided beds for the most needy folks who are battling addiction at a time when addiction rates are skyrocketing. We're in the middle of an opioid epidemic. People are dying, and we have less capacity to provide the services that we need to keep people alive. We did important work on children's mental health and important policy. We have not fully funded it either. If you talk to anybody in a school, you talk to parents, the need out there is far in excess of our capacity. So it's I think, a real problem. And one of my big disappointments is we didn't do anywhere near enough to support the need that's out there. I don't know that we could have, but we could have done more than we did. And on the fiscal guardrails, there are technical problems with the way some of those are written. They have done a lot of good in some ways, but one of the issues that I've been addressing in my corner of the state budget is when we see a drop in federal funding, and in fact sometimes federal law requires us to make up the difference. So the feds to say, hey, we're going to give you half as much as we did last year because that temporary federal boost in funding during the pandemic is no longer there, but you guys got to keep things going, and that means we have to provide more state support. Okay, on Medicaid, which provides support for people with disabilities, the poor, and the elderly, nursing homes are mainly funded by Medicaid. We have to provide $500 million in extra in state funding over the next 2 years just to do what we were doing before. No additional service, not one nickel in expanded state service. We are required by federal law. That counts against the spending cap. So that looks like, as far as we're concerned, like a huge increase in state spending. It really isn't. We're really just doing what we're required to do by federal law, and yet that means we can't provide the support we need elsewhere in the state budget. And so I think that's a design issue that we could potentially fix. At least I hope we can.
Dr. Tillman?
And Irene
No
has
questions, just some comments for the audience and you. First of all, very impressive committees that these three people are on. We often don't understand what our state senators or representatives do up there, but it's a real feather in Newington's cap when you look at the committees that they sit on. So that is something that you should be very proud of. Secondly, you and your staff does an amazing job on communicating to us. Your emails are terrific. They're almost weekly, and they're very informative. So thank you. Keep that going. Finally, the visibility that you have in the media is tremendous, either through the television or the print media. So we're very fortunate in this community to have such visibility for our representatives. So well done. I wear the hat of a local dentist and very involved in the State Dental Association, called the Connecticut State Dental Association. For the viewers and for the people here, these three representatives are beyond phenomenal. They're our go-to people. They listen to our organization. We're trying to get care for all people, and we come with an agenda that we bring to their attention, which they have to bring to the appropriate committees that they may be on, but not the co-chair. And what I've learned is how complicated the legislative process is when they go in January and go, okay, have fun, 5 months to get a budget, but it's really complicated. So I want to let you know that as you dig deeper, it becomes very complicated. I'll give you just one example, sort of tie in the story about the cancer requirements and insurance. Now, don't forget, we are the insurance capital of the world, or we used to be. Parker issues that our state dental society was trying to bring to the attention of the public was something called medical loss ratio. What's that? Basically, if insurance companies get a certain amount of money that premiums pay, they have to pay 80% of it or 90% of it for their expenses, and then 10% can go to maybe profit, company, whatever. So, I believe in medicine it might be 80 or 90%. In order to dentistry,
Zero.
it's zero. It doesn't exist. There's
Yeah.
no law. So therefore, during the pandemic, when you all paid premiums for your dental insurance, the insurance companies weren't paying anything because dental offices were closed. How about that? They made out pretty well, didn't they? So Massachusetts actually had a referendum back in November, and the population said, hey, that's not quite right. We demand to have 70% of premiums go towards the payment, towards the care. When it came to the process of bringing it to a hearing, a public hearing, it was not allowed to have a public hearing. Not because of the three people there, but because of the political system as I understand it. I could be wrong, but the point is that we have a lot to be grateful for to you three for everything you do, but from a representative from the dental community, thank you. So, and then final thing, and then I will yield the floor. Congratulations to Representative Turco on his upcoming marriage.
Hey.
Take some time off and get some rest.
Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Yes.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, Sunday. It's almost here.
It's almost here.
Thank you, Doctor, for raising the medical loss ratio. That's an issue that I hope we're able to address next year. You were right that there was a procedural tool used by the industry, the insurance industry and its lobbyists and its allies to keep you from having even a hearing. But I have some ideas about how we could potentially get around that, and I think it should be a priority issue. I think it is outrageous that there's one area where there are no protections, and if you have dental insurance, it's the Wild West. There are no rules. The companies can do whatever they want. 100% of the money could go to their own to their helicopters. Right?
Yeah.
There is no requirement that they spend even a nickel on your care, and that's not the case for other kinds of insurance. But there is for some reason nobody has ever passed a basic consumer protection law in this state for people with dental insurance, and that's crazy. So we should do that.
I think, Walter, we'll come back to you. Eileen has had a question.
I just had a couple questions with regard to the changing age for kindergarten and the birth babies. That could cause a 20% shift in enrollment, right? Because 1 year 20% are going to get booted out, and the next year they're going to have 20% more kids sitting in kindergarten, and it will level out after that. But maybe that 1 year, school districts might need some help from the state to allow this to be enacted more, fiscally responsibly. And the other thing I had a question about with that was, it did say that those burr babies would be given a test to see if they were developmentally ready. Is that a state test, or is it just a test for town? And like I just have a vision of, okay, my kid's really ready, but our enrollment is full, so see you later, goodbye. So I wondered how that was going to be handled. And the final question is, I know that the rate for Wallace reimbursement won't be set by the time it goes to referendum, but I'm sure there's a minimum ratio that we're going to be reimbursed. I just don't know.
58%.
58, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Do you want to address the kindergarten?
Actually, those are really good. As the parent of a 2.5-year-old, I'm following this issue very closely. I actually don't know the answer to that question. Do you know?
About the assessment, I actually don't know if it's a State Department of Education assessment either, Eileen. So we'll have to check on that and get back to you about who's providing that assessment, because that is something I was asked by someone else just Friday. So I don't know who's going to provide that assessment option for parents.
I thought when I asked about it to the Vice Chair of Education on the floor of the House when we were debating the bill, that it was an individual town assessment based on that town and their particular, criteria that they want to use. But I think we definitely need to verify that.
If those verbatim meet that criteria and enrollment is full,
Yeah.
are they going to still have to wait another year, or are they going to make room for them, or what are the provisions for that?
We'll find out.
Yeah, we'll have to find
We'll
out.
find out.
And some of that might have to come through regulation and isn't, hasn't all been decided yet.
It might, so you might be able to influence the regulations on that standpoint. I would also say on the reimbursement perspective, it is 58%, but I'll also tell you that as a delegation, we'll be trying to get a higher percentage of that back to the town, for the town.
We should have 58% in the referendum, so we know that, at a very minimum.
Correct, yeah.
And Eileen, I mean, you work in the Newington High School. We heard from a lot of teachers that really wanted the kindergarten age to be changed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're aware.
A
So
handful of states that had 4-year-olds.
Do it this way, yeah.
yeah. So
But I just had 3 fur babies, and I would say 2 were very ready, and 1 was not.
Yeah.
And I was very thankful that they had the opportunity to go.
right, that transition though, we need to make sure it goes smoothly.
Yeah.
Anyone who hasn't had a question the first round before we go back to second round?
Yeah.
I've got one assignment for you. I know you all have a full plate. You're all very concerned about affordable housing. I would suggest a top to bottom enema of the affordable housing industry. It's more than just a reluctance of communities who want to participate. The fact is it's a corrupt industry. People don't know about it, like utilities or dentistry, dental insurance, not dentistry, sorry. But the fact is there are very few affordable housing developers in the state of Connecticut. They are people who know how to game the system, who know how to get the low-income tax credits from the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, a group that is very well paid and doesn't work all that hard. Between their regulations, the Federal Department of Housing, the State Department of Housing, they end up creating an atmosphere where it costs almost double to make a unit of housing affordable than it does to create a market rate unit of housing. So right now, I think it's probably up to close to $400,000 per unit to create a unit of affordable housing. And the market rate is only about $200,000
Right.
to do that, right? And the trying to wrangle all these people to say, this is more than just about your job being an administrator of a program or getting some sort of VIG on setting up the loan or setting up the tax credits. Everybody takes their piece in this industry. And it creates an impossibility to get competition, lower the prices, and actually get projects built. If you had more people scurrying around trying to do it, influencing their local town plan and zoning commissions, a lot more would get done.
Well, a report just came out this week that looked, I think, Hartford and the Greater Hartford and Greater New Haven had the two of the very lowest inventories, housing inventories in the country. And I think that
anything that's not an urban area has an exceptionally low percentage of affordable housing units within their communities.
Well, not just affordable housing, just housing, period. There's just a huge housing shortage in the I-91 corridor right down the middle of Connecticut. Fairfield County is its own thing. But middle of Connecticut, we have one of the worst housing, possibly the worst housing shortage in the United States of America right now. And we need to rethink everything from soup to nuts to figure out how do we increase the supply. Because, we're focused on economic growth. We're figuring out where we are on our friendly insurance company neighbors. But we're going to lose jobs if we can't provide people to go work and fill those jobs. And right now we don't have the housing supply, and our system is broken.
I went to the housing commissioner in Connecticut and said, okay, we, in Newington, we haven't hit the 10% threshold that you guys want to see. And this is a few years ago, but we have a bunch of condominiums that we could purchase for between $70,000 and $100,000 each, and deed restrict them to be affordable. They said, well, that's not how we do it. Because we only will finance new or conversions that are essentially new at 3 to 3.5 times the expense. Total lunacy. But it's indicative of the industry. If you talk to developers, housing developers, home builders who aren't in the affordable housing industry, because if you don't have these pipelines for the low-income tax credits, if you're not connected with the banks and the insurance companies who provide them, you're shut out. But if you talk to them and say, what would it take to get you to build this housing, they will tell you.
Thank you, Andy. And,
Thank you.
I think sometimes people, like you're saying, I mean, that's a real backwards way of looking at it, that they only will have new developments and can't repurpose. I think that's got to be a big part of the conversation, is repurposing. I think a big issue in Newington, like Kathy brought up with affordable housing, is people are fearful that more housing, more building means less open space, or we've become, a real, like an urban, inner city area without walkable greenery and stuff like that, and parks and stuff. And that's not what I want for our community. That's not what I think most people in Newington want. Oh, here comes the rain. We have a lot of blighted buildings. We have buildings that could be repurposed. There's a lot of buildings in stock that could be used without taking away any of our open space, our beautiful Cedar Mountain, our parks and stuff that we want to keep and preserve. So there's a way to do that.
That building development that's going in on Cedar Street.
Yep.
Is that going to be general housing, or is it like a HUD development where people of lower income can qualify for some of those apartments?
Yep. It's meant to be affordable, or what's often also referred to as workforce housing. So really meant for so many of the working people that might be in our community. So when you think about the incomes of teachers or nurses, and certainly I imagine seniors will take advantage of moving into those units as well.
That is built as affordable
It
housing.
is.
The problem
It
with
is.
that project is they're terrible buildings. And in my time with the town, I only appeared before planning and zoning once to oppose an application. And that was the application because this developer who has built beautiful projects in other places, just down the road in New Britain, as a matter of fact, this is the cheapest, lousiest type of construction that they could get away with so they could get the project to work with all those other state and federal requirements. So very small units, stick construction. They didn't want to put in elevators on a 3-story building. We could force them to do that. Vinyl siding. Nothing against vinyl siding, but that's not a commercial product. Right? That's not something you put in a building that you expect to last 50 to 100 years. So that's very disappointing.
And I would say
they went forward and they wouldn't listen to us.
Yeah. To that point, our towns have a role in this, right? To your point. Yeah. So our towns have a role, as you noted, in regards to what more they require when a development comes forward. And so that requires our attention, as residents of Newington, as, property developers come forward with proposals, not just about the building construction, but also, are they providing, what what are they doing in regards to potentially sidewalks around the development, right? So there's things, though, that towns can pursue in really what comes of a development. And I would also, though, add to a little bit about what you asked about affordable units in our conversation here. I know at the local level, there's been some towns that have really moved forward an opportunity to build what are referred to as accessory dwelling units. Often people think of them as mother-in-law apartments onto their homes, which again offers, yes, something for your mother-in-law, but potentially a renter could live in that portion of your home. And I can tell you that at the state level, we are going to be pursuing legislation to allow accessory dwelling units, because it's another option if you think about how can we make sure that there are more housing options. It's another way we can build that into our current housing infrastructure. So I just wanted to mention that as well. Yeah.
And we actually permit that.
Correct,
in Newington
correct,
now,
correct.
But unfortunately, our average lot size is around 10,000
Yeah.
square feet. And so to meet all the other requirements, there's no room to build.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyone else that hasn't asked a question yet?
We'll wrap up. Yeah,
Okay.
please.
Is that new unit going to be a HUD unit?
Not HUD, but it is.
No.
It's not HUD.
No,
It's
it's
not
not
HUD.
HUD. It's privately managed, and they have a website where you can fill out
And look at
information,
the units. Yeah.
and then they'll let you know when the applications become available. And I believe that the rent is based on your income.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because back here, it is a HUD development.
Right.
Right.
And they charge 40% of income.
Right. Right.
And then every year they look for an opportunity to increase, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so
Understandable.
it looks like everyone asked a question that wanted to.
we'll wrap up.
We'll go for round two, last two, Terry and then Walter. Terry?
Yeah, I got a few things. I'm writing everything down. For those of you who don't know me, my wife and I have been together for 52 years. We decided not to have any kids, but we have cats. We love our cats, and those are our kids. But we also believe firmly, and it's critical, to fund and educate the kids in our town. I mean, that is one of the hugest things that we need to make sure we do. Okay? Having said that, again, education is critical to people in this town. I worked in criminal justice for 1 million years, and I saw what happened when people didn't have any money, didn't have any jobs. A lot of them turned to stealing and getting involved in other things that we shouldn't. So we have to make sure that we're doing it properly. In terms of the housing, it's affordable housing / workforce housing. Okay, so we need to understand that there are people that work in Newington and can't afford to live in Newington.
Right.
Okay, and then there are also the other people that need help, but I think it's critical. And my background, I've worked in state government, I've worked in a nonprofit, I've worked in private industry, and I was an elected official. So I've seen it all, and I know what we need to do. But I think one of the biggest things for all of you right now, we're in the process of going through putting solar into our house. Okay, so right now it's going to cost us about 30% of that is a tax credit. Okay, so at 12,000, that will eventually become a tax credit. So I think it's important for you guys to look at this. The solar perspective is going to be huge because it's going to, it's going to cut some of the utility stuff out. It's going to, one of the things for Eversource is how much can they supply. So this cuts down their need to supply as much. So the solar to me is incredible. Housing, again, it's not just affordable housing, it's workforce housing. And because there's a lot of people in mind. And, potentially, having been in this, as an elected official and everything else, I hate to say it, but there are a few people in town that look at something like affordable housing, and that translates into those people are going to come to Newington. Okay, so there is a percentage of people in Newington who believe they're not going to raise it. Okay, and I think the last thing we want to do is base any of the decisions that we're making on racism. I think it's important that we look at how we want to do housing. And affordable is, it's a combination. But to me, a lot of it is workforce housing too, because there are people that live in this town, work in this town, that can't, well, they can't afford to live in the town, but they work in the town. So I think that's critical. Mental health issue, and we're seeing it. I mean, you look in the paper the last couple of days, there's some offenses that have occurred. And I don't think we do enough in the mental health area in this state to help out the individuals, to identify them and to help them out. Because people, when they've got mental health issues, they do some stuff that's really bad. So I think that's important for all of us. But again, we're doing the solar piece and tax credits. I think for solar is going to be critical because it will keep costs down for people, and will also, help the environment, which I firmly believe we need to help the environment. And the amount of electricity we generate in this town that goes through Eversource, it's polluting our environment. So we need to make sure we're looking at those kinds of things. And I know it's been a long day.
For voting in the legislature, for early voting, and for write-in voting to make it easier for people to vote in Connecticut. Very appreciative of that, and I know that'll put Connecticut back among the leaders in the country for that process. Second thing I'd like to thank you for is for your support for HB 6489. For those who are not familiar, in regard to retired teachers, it gives them 2 more representatives on the teacher retirement board. So we now have, we'll have, instead of 2 of 13 representatives, we'll have 4 of 15 representatives. So I thank you so much for that. And an observation, just that we all watch TV and we see the stuff going on in Washington, and it drives you crazy, like, why can't we just focus on things that will be helpful? But it's a breath of fresh air to go to the state capitol in Hartford. And I've been there, I work with each of these individuals in front of us, and they've been immensely supportive. They're real human beings, they want to see things better. I've also worked with members of the other party, and there's a lot of members of the other party who are have very similar feelings. So it's kind of cordiality that when you kind of look at it, the contrast between Washington and Hartford is so dynamic. It's like, why can't they do this program on you guys? So thank you very much, and we do appreciate you. It's like, you're like Solomon, you got to solve everybody's problems. You don't have the resources. Yeah. And we know you're trying to do the very best you can. So my part, I thank you very much for all that you do. I do appreciate that.
Thank you, Walt. And congratulations to you, Walt, because you worked very hard year after year to finally get that bill passed as well. And you lobbied, all throughout session. So congratulations to you, too. Closing words?
I would just say generally, we're here for you. We said at the outset, if you have any ideas, keep coming to us because, the next legislative session will start in February because it's referred to as the short session in our 2-year cycle. And, we're in this mode now where we're thinking about the things we didn't get done, a few of which you heard, but we want to be collecting more of those ideas to come. So we're always here and we want to hear from you.
Adding on, I'll just say we're good at certain things, but we are terrible mind readers. So if there's something that you want us to take on, either in the off session, working with a state agency or with the town, or in legislation starting in February, as Kate mentioned, talk to us now, talk to us over the next few weeks. We're here to work for you, and we will do the best we can. And every once in a while, as Walt and Janet found out, we can pass some laws, and Pam as well. Actually, we got a bunch of experienced law passers in this room, and so we're here to be helpful, and we want to make the town a better place.
Yeah, it may take us several years sometimes to get a great idea into law, but we eventually can get there as long as we work together. We collaborate, work as a team, I am so happy I get to work with Representative Kate Farrar and Senator Lesser. I'm probably the luckiest member in the House, 151 and all 187 delegate, to have such a great delegation for Newington. People I can rely on, people I can text late at night if there's a problem or ask questions to. And you don't find that for every delegation around the state, where sometimes they're battling each other or trying to, be the showboat or something. And we just try to get the job done and then do it as a team. So we're here for you. Please bring those ideas off session. And we look forward to having a great summer, fall with you all. So, thank you.
Yes, thank you all. Please.
Thank you.